Hello everybody, this is Jerry Mantell with In the DAW. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at a new plugin that is being added to an already existing bundle. Now these plugins are essentially recreations of the hardware made by Scape, and it's in conjunction with Kiive Audio. So the plugins that already exist are the Scape XL305R, which actually comes with an emulation of the original XL305 spring reverb unit. This has 12 tempered springs that essentially make a very uniform and unique reverb sound. You get a switch that allows you to have the modern interpretation of the current XL305R from Scape and the vintage unit that this is based off of. You'll see that this unit has an input drive, a mix knob, a set of 4-band EQs. They're all at a fixed frequency, 150, 600, 2K, and 6K. You get to cut and boost 10 dB, and you have a mono drive and a mono return. You can link and unlink each section, and in normal Kiive Audio fashion, you have your preset menu, you have your input and output link, stereo width, oversampling, and pre-delay up to 500 milliseconds. This reverb is really cool because the 305R, I noticed, has a completely different stereo image and a completely different tone and decay than the XL305. 305 is much darker and almost sounds a little bit cloudier in some instances, where the 305R seems to have a little bit more sheen in it. The Golden 58 tube preamp is an emulation of Scape's very own unique Golden 58 tube preamp. This comes with, I believe, 6 premium NOS tubes, Philips GE5879s, and Jan 12 AU7s. This also has 4 NOS input transformers per unit, and it has 58 dB of gain per channel. You also get a voice switch, which will essentially add a very, very smooth single pole Butterworth filter with a 3 dB dip at around 40 hertz crossover point. So think of this as a very subtle low frequency cutoff and then a tiny little dip at about where it starts. The things that you get that are added from the original unit, if we look at the picture of the original unit right up here, well, we get an added output compensation, automatic gain compensation, as well as a bias control. Now you can increase or decrease the bias, which will make the tubes saturate more or less, but also add low-end weight to the signal. So when you have negative bias, you get a little bit of a flatter signal with less saturation. And when you increase it, you actually get a more warm, thicker tone. This can work in both left, right, or mid-side mode. It has oversampling, stereo width control, and in and output gain compensation. The final module, which is the brand new plugin, is the VComp Plus, which is the Scape VComp. This is an emulation of Scape's VComp Plus or VComp Plus Deluxe hardware unit, which if we look at the picture here, you can tell that this is a stay level. This has a lot of cool modern takes on it though. We have the input drive, which will basically increase the input gain. We have a much more varied recovery time. So instead of having the original recovery time, which if we click the vintage mode, we can see where we had slow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then fast, we now have slow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 until you hit fast. So you have 9 different speeds in your recovery versus the original 6. You have the 3 different modes, single, double, triple, and off. I also love that we have oversampling, automatic gain compensation, and THD control, as well as a sidechain filter, which goes up to 800 hertz. The THD is very, very tricky because if you have it too low, you'll thin the signal a little bit. But if you crank it too high, you get a ton of this vintage tube distortion. Basically, all the tubes and transformers that are being emulated just crank up. So anything past about like 5 or 6, you really start to hear the distortion. And anything at past 10, you're basically just going full on distortion. And that's when you use the mix knob to do some parallel processing. Let's jump into the session. So this is a song that you guys have heard before. This is a cover of Tom Petty's Running Down a Dream. Everything's in MIDI. The drums are MIDI. The bass is MIDI. The guitars, the synths are all MIDI. And the only thing that I'm using that is audio is the vocals. But this is not original vocals. This is a full-on cover. Let's listen to this A lot of this stuff has been mixed using the Scape plugins, so we'll go over everything after we take a quick listen. So here we go.
It was a beautiful day, the sun beat down, I had the radio on, and I was driving. Trees flew by, me and Dell was singing Little Runaway, and I was flying. Yeah, running down a dream that never would come to me, working on a mystery.
It sounds really aggressive, really rock and roll, right? A lot of that is because of the processing that I'm doing. So let's start off with the coolest thing, the V-comp. So for this, we're going to start with the bass because this is something that's a pretty basic thing, right? So I'm using Ample Sound's Total Range 6. This is a 6-string bass with nothing on. This is how it sounds. Very deep and guttural, right? Like a very, very deep guttural thing. So I'm using a SandZap emulation. I'm using a EQ. But in the mix, this kind of disappears in and out quite a bit. So I want to do some type of really aggressive compression with some tube style saturation so I can really get some grit out of this thing. So I'm going to copy my A to B settings and we're going to go to B. And let's just listen to see what happens. So I'm going to turn this on while it plays and you can really hear what I'm doing.
It was a beautiful day, the sun beat down.
So hopefully you can hear, especially if you're using speakers or really high quality headphones, you will hear that the low end basically suddenly becomes super dense. So if we solo this up, let's take a look at what I'm doing. I'm doing no input gain over here on this side, but I am using the mix knob at 50%. I have the THD at 0.9, no sidechain, but I am cranking a little bit input, have the drive on, and have this in triple mode. Have the fastest release, and then I'm just diming the output all the way up. Check this out. It's adding so much color and so much density, right? If I increase the mix knob, you hear how when I turn the THD up, we gain so much saturation so quickly, but it's interesting because it's very usable saturation. So at maybe like 7%. I could almost use that, right? I can maybe do my output compensation. It becomes very, very consistent, but I am only using this at 45% mix. So you still hear the dynamics, but you don't see it because it's very consistent. The rest of that is just this big, thick, chunky, distorted tubing goodness, right? Very, very aggressive, very stay level-y. So let's put this in the mix, right? Just put this in the mix, bypass, then we'll bring it in. Listen to the low end. Close your eyes if you have to. Use high quality headphones or studio monitors. It's very, very apparent when you have those on earbuds or laptops or cell phones. You won't be able to hear this at all.
It was a beautiful day, the sun beat down, I had the radio on, and I was driving.
Very cool. Now, if we use the vintage mode, we get a completely different tonal color. See how the vintage mode almost dulls out the tone? It's very vintage, very old school. You get a slower recovery time. You get almost like a slower attack time too. And the modes just don't have as much frequency content. It's not as high fidelity. You definitely have a more rounded off tone. It still sounds really good. But because we have that really nice modern hardware kind of fidelity, we're able to drive this thing and get that cool vintage tone with the modern needs. Honestly, I think it's great. I actually prefer my B setting to my original setting because I really like having that extra THT. The distortion, beautiful. Now, talking about distortion, let's solo up the snare. I'm going to bypass the reverb send, and here we go. That sounds like a rocking snare. It's obviously a sample, but I'm going to bypass everything. Sounds good, but it just doesn't sound as just aggressive and upfront as I want. So let's turn that back on. With everything on, it just sounds like a cannon being shot out. It's fantastic. So I have Oxford EQ, a native plugin. This is just the Sonics EQ. This thing is a billion years old. I don't know why, but I really like using it. Just doing a little bit of like cleaning up to the signal. Kind of making it a little bit thin, right? Well, that's where we have the AS Golden 58. This is a preamp in mic mode. I have it gained at about like 2 or 3 o'clock. I have the bias turned up to about 31. Auto gain on. Mic level, no polarity, and I'm using voice mode because I'm using that slight roll off to get rid of the unwanted muddiness. Listen to that, just that alone. So much aggression. And because I'm able to gain some headroom by using this as a very controlled clipper, I'm able to bring the output just a little bit more and get a lot out of this. Check this out when I change the gain and just crank it all the way up. So we're going to copy A to B. Lots of distortion, right? Now we can increase it by doing the input gain. But listen to that bias. When I turn the bias down, it almost sounds just as distorted, very controlled distortion, but it's also slightly thinner. You don't hear the impact of the low end really kind of distorting out, which is why I like increasing the bias. Now, besides that, I am using this really amazing reverb, right? Well, that is the Audioscape XL305R. So this is an amazing, beautiful spring reverb unit. It has 12 tempered springs. Really, really nice, amazing sounding reverb. So let's bring that up. So that is on my reverb send for the drums. I have that, and then after it, I'm using the Oxford EQ to kind of roll off low end, roll off a tiny bit of high end, and then get rid of resonances. And I am actually using the vintage XL305 mode. I noticed that it has a completely different tone, and for some reason, I like this darker, muddier tone for this. So check this out. That decay is so much more lush and so much more vibrant. The stereo width is a little bit wider on the XL305R. Whereas the 305 has this kind of dull tone, but it's perfect for this like really distorted snare. It kind of makes it sound like it's shooting a cannon out. Whereas this is like a really nice echoey kind of for like ambient ensemble stuff or maybe vocals. This just has this density, this amazing density. Now for this, I'm cranking the input for the gain. I'm basically driving the spring. I'm boosting 150, boosting 2K, cutting 6K, cutting 600. Mono return is off, but I am using the mono drive. No pre-delay. Everything's linked. This thing's amazing. This thing's just amazing. overall, I think this is an amazing bundle, and I really like that Kiive Audio has given me the opportunity to take a look at these plugins. I didn't even know they existed until a couple of weeks ago, but I cannot live without the V-Comp. I feel like every time Kiive releases a compressor, it's just you have to have it thing. This combined with their CL1B emulation is amazing. The spring reverb, I love the dark tones. I love the lush tones. And I really actually think this is a pretty good saturator. It's so controlled. It doesn't ever just overly distort. And one thing that I actually do quite a bit is utilize Kiive Audio saturation plugins in a lot of my processing. So it's really, really good to see how something like this is really, really being used very nicely in a more subtle way. Anyway, this is Jeremy Tay with In the DAW. I will see you guys later. I will leave links to Kiive Audio and Audioscape's website where you can check out Kiive Audio's plugins and Audioscape's plugins and hardware. None of them are affiliate links, even though I wish they were, but these things are absolutely amazing. I will see you guys later. Bye.